Hello again, Julie here again, and I have another really special treat for you today. I have my dear friend Simon Lilly. Now, many of you will know Simon through his books that he wrote on crystals, and the very first book I ever read on crystals was Simon's. But over the years, we've become friends. But Simon has an array of other things he can talk about. But one of the magical things is the runes. And he's a real expert and specialist, or I feel he is. Simon might say differently, on the runes. Now, you may not have never heard of what runes are. Well, you're in for a treat. And they, I think, the oldest form of divination that we know of, but I could be wrong, and Simon will tell us shortly. So welcome, Simon.
Hello.
Thank you for this today. And if you'd like to just say a little bit about yourself and talk about the runes.
Yeah, well, I suppose I've been working on the esoteric side of things forever. And over different decades, I tend to focus on different things. So it's probably, runes are probably one of the earliest interests that I had, probably from reading The Hobbit and the cover of the original Hobbit. And also my father had a book on old languages, which had a little bit on runes in them. So that got me interested in the runes as an alphabet, as a way of, I suppose, a secret writing, and which it was in the late 60s and early 70s.
Oh,
because really it was,
I had, yeah, so it was a secret form of,
it was, well, it was and it wasn't. I mean, all writing was secret to people who don't know how it works. It was, the runes were used as a written language for a while, but once Latin took hold, it was easier to write in Latin in Europe, so it tended to die out, and then it became more of a secret language. What happened with runes is, apart from being known by a few Anglo-Saxon historians and specialists, they weren't really on any esoteric radar at all until the early 70s, when an American, Ralph Blum, or Bloom, I don't know how he's pronounced, published his first book on rune divination, and that became very popular. I got a first set, and I was given a set later on as well. It wasn't particularly useful for in-depth divination, for quite sensible reasons, really, because there isn't, and there never has been, much written information about the runes. So let's start at the beginning. The earliest description of what we think is runic divination is from Tacitus, who was a Roman historian who wrote in Roman times. It was fairly early on. I think it was after Caesar, before the collapse of the empire. So I think it was first century, something like that. And he wrote about the German tribes, or the tribes in the area known as Germania, which we now call mainly Germany. And he described a divination system where small pieces of branch were cut off of different trees, marks were put on them, and after the requisite rituals, the pieces were dropped or cast, and then it's not very clear, some of them probably were picked up, and the marks on those were then interpreted as the oracle. So that's the first thing that seems to be a runic type reading. Most of the data or text information comes from much later, in the Viking era, which is basically early medieval time, the 10th, 11th, 12th centuries, when particularly in Iceland, they were trying to remember the old times. And in the sagas, there's quite a lot of information or mention of runes and working runes for magic, not necessarily for divination.
Okay, so for magic as well. How interesting.
It was. I mean, the whole thing up until 16th century, everything was magic. It doesn't matter what it was, whether it was science, whether it was religion, whether it was cookery, whether it was, you know, anything. It was all. It all had magical intent and magical stuff going on.
Yeah.
So. Certainly in terms of the saga information, most of the references to the runes are to do with spell casting, either cursing or healing or whatever. So there aren't many rune objects with runes written on them. I mean, comparatively small number, like a couple of 100, 300. Most people associate runes with the big carved stones in Scandinavia, in Sweden and Denmark and Norway, but those are very late, and they're usually written inscriptions, either memorials or place markers. They may have magical intent, but they're signposts basically. Runes, in most people's minds, you're right, yeah, are associated with stone, therefore, but most people who know about runes and the way that they are structured and the information about them believe they're more suited to wood.
So it's more suited to wood.
Yeah. So the shapes of the runes are composed of these the two lines. The where are we?
Your face. We're here.
In front of me.
Yes,
there we are.
I can see you.
The vertical and the diagonal.
Wow.
And all runes are made of those two things. I'll show you a runic alphabet. Go back to history just a little bit. The runes, the earliest rune row, complete rune row, is about the 5th century AD. So it's not ancient. And that was in the area of Germany, what is now Germany. And it seemed to have spread from there west and north. But the thing with the runes,
just move it this way a little bit. That's it. Yep, that's it.
Is that there are 3 main variations of the alphabet.
Yeah.
Now it is an alphabet in that each of the runes have a letter correspondence, which stays fairly consistent throughout the rune rows. The shapes vary a lot. But the thing is with the runes that there isn't a precursor to the alphabet at all. So it looks as though it was invented by one person or a small group of people who made it whole, complete from scratch.
Wow.
It didn't develop from other things, although there are other alphabets and other languages, written scripts that do have very runic looking letters, right from the west of Spain right through to Ethiopia. There's some amazing columns in Ethiopia, like obelisks, that have got very runic type writing on them. It's probably that the Phoenicians, Carthaginians, who were the people who first had alphabets, influenced a lot of these early alphabets. And at some point, somebody up north decided that it was useful to have another version of that. So the earliest set of runes is a set of 24 shapes. The 24 shapes are on your left there.
Yes, we can see
the 24, and they're nearly always in that order, and they're nearly always arranged. If they're arranged in any divisions, they're in groups of 8, 3 groups of 8.
Oh, wow.
Now, sometimes some of the runes are changed around a little bit, but basically once it's there, the runes are there. What happened was that when the original set of information started to move north and then move west to Britain, it modifies slightly. So what happened was that in the later periods in what we call what we think of as being Viking times in Scandinavia, the runes reduced to 16 in number.
Wow.
What happened in on the Channel coast and in England, when they moved to England with the people there, is they increased in number. So whereas the runes go down in Scandinavia and Iceland to 16, they increased to first 29 and then to around about 32, 33 in England. And that was by about the 9th century.
Wow.
And that gives about 300 or 400 years of rune use before Latin took over as the written script. In terms of sort of writing useful things, in terms of magical use, it's very much more difficult to work out what was going on, because of course those sort of things tended to be private, secret, or individual. There are a couple of mnemonic sort of rows from later in the medieval period, which just listed the names given to the runes. But another mystery about the runes is we don't really know what they were called, apart from those lists, and we don't necessarily know the original names. So the names that the runes are given now tend to be, especially with the Germanic, the Elder Futhark, it's called Futhark because it's like Futharc or K is the first 6 letters. So it's like the alphabet is alpha and beta, da, da, da. So the Elder Futhark, the 24 rune set, what was I saying? It was, yeah, the names given to those are based on imagined or suspected root words. They aren't the names that the people using the runes would necessarily have given to them. Okay, right. So that's a brief historical thing about that. To recap on the divination side, we know that the runes pretty much were used for magic and healing and cursing, the usual sort of stuff, throughout their existence. The use in divination is not so clear at all. And modern divination with runes, as far as we know, at least the popular use of runes, started in the mid-70s. So that system was heavily based, well, Ralph Bloom used the I Ching as one of his guides. And obviously he was using a lot of layout rather than casting, and it was very tarot based systems. So that's a big difference from the early uses of runes.
Yeah.
When I started working or reworking with runes, when I started working with them again in the early 90s, I was like everybody else. I suppose I read everything that was going on the runes, which tended to be very repetitive and not particularly in depth. With tarot, you've got quite a useful amount of information given on each card and each system and whatever. So you've got quite a lot of variety. The weakness in the modern rune system was that there wasn't an expansion of the idea of what was going on with each rune. So you could say, oh, well, I can see wealth and I can see, maybe protection, but the reader didn't really have much else to go on apart from that. So one of the things I was interested in was to find out, without going into pseudo-mythological stuff, which some authors do, this rune is related to this deity or this old belief, which may be useful historically, but isn't particularly useful in a divination sense, because it just gets horribly confused and you just go down rabbit holes all the time, because there's so little information about Norse mythology. Really, I mean, there's more about Norse than there is about Celtic, but it's still not very much. So I wanted to look at the runes themselves, and that's how I started working. Actually, the first thing I started was that I was looking at on a boring day in Cardiff at a mind, health, body, mind, body, spirit, mind, body, spirit. That's the other one. Mind, body, spirit show in Cardiff on a wet bank holiday in March sometime, and it was dead as a doornail. So I spent time looking at lots of different tarot packs and thinking, these are really badly drawn tarot packs. Thinking, as an artist, thinking, well, maybe I should do a tarot pack. And then thinking, 78 cards in a tarot pack, and most of the poor tarot cards only put their energy into the major arcana anyway and ignore the minor. So I thought, oh, it's a bit of a hard work that. Then I looked at some rune cards. There were a few sets of rune cards. I thought, God, the hard work in these are even worse than they are in the tarot. So there was sort of a point there of thinking, oh, maybe I could do a more interesting rune deck. And then just looking at the shapes, thinking, they're weird shapes. They are not sort of, they're funny, you know. So that's where I started, from an artist looking at them like that. And that was the first thing that I came to, that they are all composed of the vertical and the diagonal. There is the diagonal the other way as well, and there's the up as well as the down, but there's basically those two shapes. All the runes are composed of those two shapes. So that gives you a starting point as to what is going on with the meaning of each of the runes. Because I reckon, well, you know, these aren't random shapes. They must have some relevance to what they refer to.
Yes.
The runes themselves give the information. This is the simplest rune, and it's called ice.
Ice, yes.
A single vertical. And you can see from a visual and dynamic perspective, it isn't doing anything. It's just there. It's not got no dynamic movement to it. Whereas the simplest rune with only diagonals is Ken.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah. So we got fire, we got ice, and we got the first creature, which is the first rune, which is called Fee, and Fee is a cow. And you can see that rune as being the head of a cow with its head down and its horns sticking out to the side. Now, the first creature, the cow, licked the ice and created the first beings. So there you've got, within the runes there, you've got the polarities of ice and fire, and potentially a sequence of creation stories, all created with those diagonals and verticals. So that was what I worked on, just looking at each shape and seeing what was going on. Now, I was using two methods for interpreting the runes, just using the shape. And the first method was where we divide space into past, future, and matter, spirit. So it's a division of sort of, and that works with how the mind interprets objects and directions. So we tend to see the lower stuff to do with the ground, to do with things under us as being material, earth, physical, and we see the sky and stuff above us as being spiritual, ethereal, non-manifest. So it goes like that. And we got the division of, we're here in the middle and the present, and tends to be to the left of us is the past, and to the right is a future. And that's how the eye moves when it tries to access information in the brain as well. So it looks a certain way to get things from the past memory. It gets goes the opposite direction to invent stuff imaginatively from a future. It goes to the senses by looking down, and it goes to the more mental faculties by the eyes moving up. So it's a combination of using that sort of the division of space that humans tend to see existence in, plus the way that a diagonal. So, for example, let's give an example of a rune. Let's say, well, let's see. To start with, Fee then. So if we start with the first rune, Phi, physically, it looks horribly unbalanced because all the energy is up here. You know, if you made it out of wood and tried to put it up, it would just fall over.
Yes.
And it feels like that when you're looking at it. So the thing is that shape is inherently dynamic and unstable. And if you look, it's got two of the fire lines, the diagonals, and one vertical. So it's more dynamic than it is stable. The nature of Phi, the cow, is to do with wealth and abundance. Now, the thing is with wealth and abundance is that it isn't necessarily a thing, it's a belief. And the rune shows that, because all the activities on the upper half is not to do with physicality, to do with the real world, it's to do with appearances. And wealth and status is status, it is a social construct. Now, wealth and status was measured by how many cows you had. So the cow becomes equated with wealth because of you know, I've got more cows than you, therefore I am prime minister of this country because I am rich in cows. Your cows are useless, mine are brilliant. That's how wealth, you know, goes. There is another rune to do with wealth.
Fascinating. It's just fascinating.
That shape, that, which is basically the that. Where are we? There we are.
Yeah.
And that is the rune which is more to do with inherited wealth.
Oh.
That is actual stuff.
Actual stuff.
And the home and security of the home and basically things that you've accumulated and that are solid. They aren't stocks and shares. Well, they might be stocks and shares, but they're not, they're more real. They're silver, gold, and things, bricks and mortar. You can see that the difference, the concept of wealth is different because it has energy above and energy below.
Yes.
So it's rooted in physicality.
Yes.
And it is an enclosed space that goes from the past to the future.
Yes.
It travels along from past, from the left side, through the midline, which is now, into the future. So it's a continuity. Yeah. Now, that rune, Othel or Ethel, depending on which name you use, is, what was I going to say? It's more than just inherited wealth, because if you look at it from an energetic point of view, it comes up from the bottom left, goes up to the mid top right, then goes back again, back again, back again. So it's basically it goes back on itself.
Yes, yes.
So it's not just wealth, it's to do with tradition and inheritance and the continuity of and looking back. And in that case, then it is to do with memory and genetic stuff as well. It's to do with that continuity of things. So that's just looking at the two runes of wealth in that way, you start accumulating other meanings. And for somebody who uses them for a divination system, it's no good if you just got, oh, it means gold rings and you know, wills and inheritance. If you know it's to do with remembering, memory, continuity through the past and the functioning of the brain in remembering things, then you're getting another level of meaning completely there. The other thing, that's clear enough? Yeah, clear as mud. Yes, another thing that is very important in terms of connecting it to a shamanic old worldview of what's real and what's not real, is that that symbol,
yes,
which is three vertical lines, three downward, no, three verticals, three diagonals going that way and three diagonals going the other way, is a symbol that crops up in, I don't know how old it is, I'm not sure what the oldest version of it is, but it's known as a symbol that represents, first of all, the world tree. Now, in Norse cosmology, the world tree is basically the root of everything. So everything, all worlds, all realms, and all creatures dwell within different parts of the world tree. So it's sort of it's basically the world tree is a picture of the universe. And this symbol represents that tree. The interesting thing is it's got 3, 3, and 3. So it's 3 times 3 times 3. So it's got 9, which is, 3s are always tend to be sacred, otherworldly numbers in a lot of mythologies. But also within that shape, all the runes can be seen. Depending on how it's drawn, if it's drawn slightly better than this,
Okay,
there are variations of it slightly depending on how the bits are spaced.
Yeah.
You can make all the runes that exist within the lines, but also you've got a number of voids and spaces there, which also make up the number of runes in the extended rune sets as well. So you've got basically that symbol is sort of the everything that is the Norse cosmology, which is the rune tree, the world tree, which is the source of all the runes. And that's in a visual pattern. That's exactly what that pattern of 9 lines is.
Wow.
So we can see from that very basic analysis of the runes and how they're put together is that regardless of any of the modern meanings that are given to the runes, they do contain within them quite a very coherent cosmology that can be used for magic and divination. And there's no difference really between magic and divination except what you do with the information that you get. Personally, I veer away from divination because usually divination is to do with telling people what's wrong with them and what they can do. But the thing is, most people get in the state they're in because they haven't been able to work it out for themselves. So if you tell them it might help and it might not, I tend to work directly with the rune energies and make helping combinations of runes for people to affect their energies. Because the important thing that I didn't mention was that we could see that the shapes of the runes carry the energy of the runes, how much fire, how much ice, how dynamic, how active. So the shape carries the energy. We can see from that design that the runes represent everything in the universe because the tree represents the whole universe. So every possible combination of existence, energy, thought, activity is contained within the runes. So if you're failing at something, it's because you're not making use of some of the energies that you require. So what I tend to do in my work when I'm working for people is just work out what runes are best suited to that situation with that person, and then make up a talisman, something like that, which has got the runes that I've worked out intuitively based on their energies, what will activate what is not being activated. So it is magical, but it's a passive thing. It's not it's not forcing energies. The thing is with runes, with shapes, is that you put a shape somewhere in the universe, it has an automatic attraction to every other shape of that sort in the universe. So if you need an abundance shape in your life, then an abundance rune will automatically tend to activate the abundance qualities within you. And I tend to leave it at that rather than say, well, you've got to change your activity and do that, because people will change when their energies flow better, and they'll flow in a way which is best for them. If you tell people this is what you've got to do and this is what you need to do, they will say, yes, I'll do that. But their habit patterns will tend to prevent them from doing that, because that's the way that people work. So if you provide them just their body, their unconscious mind with the energy, then that's how it works.
Or it's a little bit like Feng Shui as well, because it works like that. So This is amazing. I could talk to you hours about this, and I'm thinking that maybe we can invite you back again and we can go more into it. We could talk for hours. I had, when I remember sitting in a class with you once, and because I love working with you, I had, my favorite symbol was inertia. And I'm always thinking about inertia, and I just feel the world is in a place of inertia at the moment, because so that would fit, wouldn't it? That would, because inertia is about, we're stuck, we're waiting.
Yeah, I mean, inertia is the most difficult thing to get out of, because its nature is not to move.
Yeah.
So, you know, the habit, it's all to do with what you're used to. If you're used to inertia and it becomes the state you're in, to introduce something from outside into that becomes incredibly difficult.
Yes.
But inertia isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's the proportion of inertia to everything else is what's wrong. If everything becomes too much inertia, then you lose, all the energy runs out of things, and it just becomes impossible to move. I mean, I lost the inertia in the world is not because there's a lack of stillness, it's because there's too much of the other. There's too much fire, which is burning things up too much, and that means that leads to exactly the same thing, but in reverse. Rather than having destruction because nothing can function, there's destruction because everybody's trying to do everything all at once, and it's just going the other way. So the whole lesson of the runes is you need the combinations of the correct energies in order to create a balance where you get dynamic stillness or stable motion. The thing is with the rune Phi, for example, that one is that it can be positive and negative, and not necessarily even if it just appears one way or another. It's got qualities of both depending on how it's used. So if you have the idea, if you go back to the idea of the cow, if you've got lots of cows, that's great, but you need lots of fields to put the cows in. If you run out of fields, you run out of food and the cows will die. So that's where you've got excessive Phi energy without the correct balance of, the word would be husbandry, looking after what you've got. Then it's pointless having it, because it's all going to just disappear, because the Phi rune hasn't got any stability to it. So it needs other energies with it, or it needs to be controlled by other energies. So like life, you know, you can't just eat chocolate because you need other things as well. Chocolate's all very well, but
we need the rest.
In the end, it's not, because if you don't have bananas as well, and beer and bananas and chocolate is better.
And a bit of whiskey.
That's it. So the thing is, working with runes is not, it can be good as a diagnostic assessment of what's going on, but personally I tend to use it just as a what is somebody lacking and what will fix it by using the rune energies in various ways. So rather than sort of intellectualizing about what is required, because each of the runes is so multi-level that an individual can't possibly say, unless they're really good, what function that rune is playing in that person's life on every level. And I prefer not to do that, but I prefer to say, well, this is what you do, this is what you use. Not even saying what the runes are for or what they mean. It's the shapes carry the message, or the code, even the codes of the runes of the shapes of the message. So that goes into the subconscious, the unconscious mind, and the subtle systems of the body. And because they are very direct, no nonsense, a bit like color, they have quite a powerful effect quickly, and they can cut through a lot of our problem is always to do with our mind. It's always to do with what we can and can't do, what we think we can and can't do, what we are and what we think we're not. So you've got to cut through that to some extent. You can't over rationalize the mind, because it isn't really particularly rational.
No.
So giving it an energy basis that the body recognizes, and it's just a nice bit of pretty wood with a few designs on it, you know, nothing more threatening than that.
This that you gave me with all the
yeah.
I remember one time when I was needing a little bit of grounding and coming down, and you gave me another one. Oh my gosh, it was like magic. In my
I wonder what that was.
well, that's something to keep me out of my head and put me grounded. But I remember you giving it to me, and we put it in my pocket, and I'm like, oh, I'm back again. I feel like I'm back in the flow.
Yeah.
So,
the nice thing about runes as well is that although they come from a Northern European tradition, they don't have, especially this way of working, they don't have any theology attached to them. So they don't require you to believe or not believe, or to think they're this or think they're that. If you think of them, each rune as an aspect of universal energy, in the same way as a number is an aspect of universal energy, you can, or a color is an aspect of universal energy. They're all codes for just aspects of universal energy, and that's how I see them, and that's how I work with them. A lot of people will work them in different ways, but I find that for me this is a nice way of working.
Well, Simon, it's amazing talking to you. And you've got some. Have you got some to show us here? That
I just got a few of the other things I make.
Yeah.
Some of these are to order, and some of them I just make them. A lot of them are, some of them are spell bowls, and some of them are to do with divination. This is a combination of one and the other. You've got a divination ability on the top, and you've got functional spell things.
And this is wood, and this is carved.
And they're all different woods, and they fit in with what I tend to put on them depends on what the wood is.
Yes. That's gorgeous. Wow.
So there's 2 or 3 things I tend to work with, and take the price labels off. Like there's these divination plates, which are good for casting, or using your fingers or a wand to work out.
Wow.
And that's quite a nice way of, because there's one thing that you don't want to do as a mind, body, spirit fair is start throwing runes around on a table, because you'll end up with most of them will be on the floor, and you'll come back with 10 missing. So I thought the place of the bowl as a really good way for rune readers to cast, rather than having just a cloth where things go off into the table. So I started doing those along.
Sorry, Simon, do you have any runes with you? Do you have a bag of runes or anything with you?
I don't tend to make wooden runes that often these days, because they're very time consuming to make, but I have got some rune cards which I'll get published. There's 2 sets. Where are we? There's the black.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Black ones. Oh, look, feet again.
Yeah, it's coming up for a reason, Simon.
Yeah. And there's a white set as well.
Oh wow. And these can be purchased from you directly. Yeah,
direct. Yeah. And there's a few other sets as well, which are sometimes in and out of print. It depends a lot on how much things cost to get posted these days to Britain. So I managed to get some UK printers to print these cards, so that's a lot. Oops, is quite handy, and they are good quality card. And what with these ones, what I've done is it was a long time ago. I developed these cards. The shapes represent the movements of the energies of the card, of the rune. And there are words that are not that easy to see, because they're not supposed to be easy to see, but there are words which are suggestive of the complex meanings of the runes around the edges. So that was something else I've been working on over the years, is the sounds relate to the energies, and the meanings of the words is also added into the system. So it gives another quality of things. So those are the main things I do. I do make rune sets, but as I say, they are a bit, I prefer to do the stuff the other way.
Yeah, better. And
also rune sets on tend to be on the net are horribly cheap, and you think, I don't know how people can do them for that price, because unless they've got huge machinery and things to churn them out, you can't do them for the cost. But you'll see if you go to the various sites of ours, you'll see that what is available and what's
well, I recommend anything that you make. All your work is amazing and beautiful. Do you have your book there to show them?
Yeah.
Your book.
So the first book I wrote was Rune Equations.
You see it? Perfect.
Hang on, that's my head. There we are.
It's fine.
Rune Equations.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's got a whole load of stuff inside about all the runes and lots of information about how they can be used, and also casting information as well somewhere.
Brilliant.
I think, yeah, sort of like different ways of casting.
Brilliant.
Whatever. And then that was the first one, and the one I wrote after that was the English runes, which is more to do with the first one is to do with exploring the shape of the runes. This one's more to do with the sounds and the letters that are associated with the runes. So again, it's there's a series of pages on each rune, and some of the information is the same, but there's a whole lot of different additions in this one to do with language. And that, for readers, that's really useful to have a whole set of other meanings, other words that can be used to do with aspects of the qualities of the runes. So that's the hot bestseller, the Rune Equations, and that's fairly well as well.
Wonderful. Simon, I always think of you as amazing anyway, and you're so interesting. I would love
I am very
interesting.
Can't shut me up once you get me going.
Once we get you going. So what I would like to do here, I'm going to invite you back again, and we can talk about some more later, if that would be okay. How can people get in touch with you now? I mean, they can get in touch with me to get in touch with you, but how could they get in touch with you directly?
Oh, there's no way to do that. I've got a whole system of I avoid people like the plague. Oh, contact with people? No, woman.
You live in the middle of nowhere anyway, so.
Probably the best way is email. So it's Simon simonhlilly@gmail.com.
Brilliant. And then can
hang on.
Yeah, you can write it down. Whilst he's writing it down, just remember, if you like what you've heard and you would like to know more, please do like on the video here on the YouTube, and please do subscribe. There we are, simonhlilly@gmail.com. That's how to get in touch with him directly. But like I said, you can get in touch with me too. And he has a website, but his work is beautiful. And he does in days of COVID, before COVID, but I'm sure COVID will leave us sooner or later. You would travel around the UK doing mind, body, spirit shows, and you can find him there too. Hopefully that won't be too soon, a bit too far away. Too soon, far away. You know what I mean, Simon. You always get me tongue-tied. Anyway, folks, if you like what you hear, please do subscribe to the channel. It is free, and we can offer more of this, but we will definitely be inviting Simon back. So Simon, really thank you very, very much for this wonderful information today. I've really enjoyed it, and you've really got me thinking, as always. I do think sometimes. And it was our absolute pleasure to have you. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you again on channel and in real life very soon.
Thanks, Julie. It's been a pleasure. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye. Bye.